Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Manisha Nanda from the Department of Biotechnology, Dolphin PG Institute of Biomedical and Natural Sciences, Dehradun. So today we are in the process of learning various techniques in research methodology, and today we have already covered a lot of things in your syllabus, and today I would like to talk to you about scientific writing, and or you can also call it as project report preparation or writing a research paper. So we'll be dealing with what are the fundamental aspects that one should consider in scientific writing and how it is different from general scientific writing. Okay, so I'll help you understand this with the help of that project report preparation, the dissertation that you do in your first sem. So we have already discussed with what is the fundamental of research, what are the basic things that you should consider while designing your research. So now once you have conducted your research and you wish to uh, I mean, submit it in the form of a dissertation or a research paper. So that we are going to discuss today. So let's start with scientific writing. Okay. So I'll just first tell you what are the fundamental elements that you should keep in mind once you are preparing a scientific report or a project report. So the key elements that it should include should be the title page, the table of contents, the abstract, introduction, review of literature, materials and methods, results, discussion, conclusion, and the references. Sometimes we can always take up results and discussion together. So while preparing a report or while preparing a dissertation or a research paper, it is very necessary for you to just go through the guidelines according to, say, for example, if you wish to write your dissertation and submit it to your university, then you just have to see what format they accept, whether they accept results and discussion to be separate or they take it as one. So one should always keep in mind that while preparing a write-up for any organization where you want to submit it, in scientific writing, we should first go through the format and the guidelines that are presented there. So we'll first take up the title page. So the title page should include the following. It should first of all denote the title of the report, and the title of the report while getting it printed or while designing your research, you should always keep in mind that it should be short, specific, and descriptive. This means that you should take you can say very smart keywords which should actually define your research completely, and it should contain the keywords of the report. That is, keywords are the important words that actually define your research, and it also helps somebody to search for your work, right? So you must keep in mind that those keywords should be very smartly chosen. Then it should display the degree for which you are actually submitting your dissertation. Then we have the student's name, name of the supervisor and designation, the affiliation, and of course the year of publication. So this is a sample, you can say, title page of what dissertations are done here in Dolphin. We normally tell the students to prepare the title page in this format. Here you can see this is the title of the dissertation, and you can see two logos. One is of Garhwal University and the other is of Dolphin Institute. And then it gives details about the affiliation of the university, then the degree, the name of the guide, and the name of the candidate. Okay, I hope it is clear to all of you. This will help you a lot once you will write down your dissertation. Okay, then comes the abstract. Now, abstract, as the name defines, it is the crux of what you have done in very few words. An abstract normally ranges from 150 to 200 words that I consider are sufficient enough for a good abstract, and it actually defines or your research in a very precise form. Okay, so the abstract is a self-contained synopsis of the report, an informative summary of what you did and what you found out. The abstract should include the following: the objectives and scope of investigation, a brief reference to materials and methods, a summary of the results and conclusions, a brief but thorough statement of the outcomes of the experiment. If there is a hypothesis, you may state what it is and whether it was supported or refuted. But you must keep in mind that these points seem to be very descriptive. But as I have told you that the word limit for abstract is very less. That is, you have to just compile it in 150, 200, or maximum 250 words. So you should be very, very carefully choose your sentences, and you just have to look for what are the very important findings of your research. You should not give any vague statements or very, you can say, very complicated statements in abstract. Your focus should be that whenever somebody reads your abstract, because it comes first, even if it is a research paper or your dissertation, they should clearly get what were the objectives of your research, how you conducted your research, and what is the major outcome of particular research. The following should not be included in the abstract, that is literature citations, formulae and abbreviations, and any references to tables. Okay, so although the abstract comes first in a report, it is best to write it at last, obviously, because we have to tell about our findings, our conclusions, and obviously you will do a lot of literature survey again, while you can say after conducting your experiments once you get your research. This is because you again have to analyze your research results according to what others have done. So it is better to write it at last, after you have the results and conclusions. The abstract should very precisely summarize the whole report, why it was written, what was discovered or developed, and what is claimed to be the significance of the effort. So I hope abstract is clear to all of you.
Yes,
Please go
ma'am.
on
Yes,
this.
ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Any questions from your side? Okay, Madhura, can you please unmute?
Yes.
Any questions, Madhura?
No, ma'am. Not till now.
Okay,
No.
so you're clear with what an abstract
Yes,
is?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. I guess others have also posted their responses. So we'll just move ahead with the lecture. Then comes the introduction part. Okay, introduction, as the name defines, it is a clear-cut introduction, or it introduces what you are actually going to do in that particular research design. So the introduction provides a summary of the analysis to be undertaken. The purpose of introduction is to put the reader in the picture and place the research or experiment within a context. The following may be included in the introduction: background about the analysis to be carried out. It is very important to tell that why have you selected this particular research topic and what is the background behind it. A brief review of previous research, that is called the relevant literature, to give a background, a paraphrase relevant facts from the scientific literature, citing the sources to support each statement. Now you see, if we talk of a dissertation, right, then this is of less importance because we already have separate chapter for review of literature where we define things very clearly. But the point is, in the literature review, we always talk about things in detail. But while introducing your research, you can consider it to be an introduction to your literature review also. Because once you'll tell about the background, you have to clearly make the reader understand that you have already done a thorough literature review on the background of the research also. And obviously, Once you'll read a lot of research papers in order to identify what is the need to conduct research in that particular field to develop the background, you always will have to, you can say, acknowledge and mention those references. You have to be very sure that whenever you use somebody's work, I think we had a talk on ethics of research also, where I have told you that it is very necessary to acknowledge and to address that particular author, whosoever's work you are using in your research proposal. Okay, then it should also tell about the reasons why the research was undertaken and a statement of hypothesis, if there is one. If you have made a hypothesis or you have a hypothesis for your research area, it should also be clearly mentioned in the introduction section only. Then an explanation of the different techniques and why they were used, a statement of objectives of what you hope to achieve. In my view, this is the main or the major thing that you can say that should be highlighted in your introduction. Because if you're clear with your objectives and you have clearly mentioned that in your introduction, one will easily get to know that what are you actually going to do in your research work. The introduction is the what and why of the experiment and should answer the following questions. What was the purpose or objective of the experiment or research? Why was the experiment or research conducted in a particular manner? I mean, why have you chosen those particular methods? And why was it important in a broader context? I just mean to say, while covering all these points that I have told you that you should mention in your introduction part, you should also justify that why you are using this particular method, or why have you chosen this field. And if you talk of the future prospects of the benefits, then also you should be very clear, citing the particular references also, that why have you chosen all these things for your research. So the introduction should not include any results or conclusions. Although you write a report or a research paper after you have conducted all your experiments and you know that you have some results or conclusions, but the point is you should not mention them in your introduction section. You can give a brief about them in the abstract. Next comes review of literature. I'll not discuss review of literature here in very detail because we have already had 2 or 3 lectures on literature review, what it is, how to perform a literature review. But again, just to brush up or to refresh, I'll again repeat one thing that I have told you while telling you about literature review, is that an effective research relies on a very extensive literature review. If you have done your homework well, you have done a very extensive literature survey, then you will know all the possible problems that you can face while conducting your research, right? You will always know an alternative method. If one of the methods that you have chosen doesn't work, you'll always know what can you do ahead in your research, and you will have an idea about the timeline, which is most important, that how will you conduct your research in different sets, how much time it is going to take, and again then you'll know the applications of your research. I have told you that one can easily identify how effectively you have you can say done your homework, or how serious you were for your research, by taking a look at your review of literature. Next comes materials and methods. Okay, as the name defines, materials and methods in simple terms, you can say the requirements and methods are the experiments, like you do your lab experiments normally in different subjects. Then you always look first of all for all the requirements or the materials that you need to conduct that particular experiment, and all the methods. Now again, it is different from a single experiment, because a complete research design will never have only a single experiment or very limited requirements. Obviously, you have defined a process, right? You have decided its different steps, and each and every step might require a different procedure to complete your entire research work. So the point is the materials or the requirements may also vary at each and every step, and also the methods may also at each and every step. So we just have to report or mention the track, because see, once you conduct a research, the most important part is this, that how have you actually conducted your research. So this should be very thoroughly written, okay, and you should explain each and everything very well, so that the reader is very clear about that you have actually conducted the experiments, and you have taken all precautions, because very good, you can say, explanation of the materials and the methods will again reflect that there is no bias in your results, or there cannot be any errors in your results. So the thing is, when somebody reads your materials and methods, then they get to know that how precisely you have designed your experiments and how well coordinated your experiments were. So let's see what should we keep in mind while writing down the materials and methods. So the materials and methods are also sometimes called the experimental, is a description of the materials and procedures used. This means what was and how it was done. It describes the process of preparation of sample, specifications of the instruments used, and techniques employed. The method should include sample size, apparatus or equipment used, experimental conditions, concentrations, the times, controls, etc. Now, this point is very, very important. You can see each and every single detail is, you can say, is very, very important. This is because your report is also a documentation of how have you done your research, what were the results. So these experiments might also be used by others in future to find something new or conduct your research in a different way. So the point is, these details can help somebody recreate your experiments or just modify them. So in case you miss all these details, nobody is going to refer to your research, and it will not be useful to anybody. While the method does not need to include minute details, there needs to be enough details so that someone could repeat the work. The purpose of materials and methods section is to describe the materials, apparatus, and procedures used to carry out the measurements. Most importantly, the section needs to provide a clear presentation of how key experiments were obtained and how the measurements were analyzed. Now, you see, again, always keep that thing in mind, that while writing it, you should just think that if somebody is going to read my dissertation, then it should be easy enough for somebody to do it again. It should be understandable. So you should, you should be very clear while writing your experiments also. This is where the particular approach followed to reach the project's objectives should be described. The detail should be sufficient so that reader can easily understand what was done. Now you see, in the introduction section, I have told you that the objectives of the research should be very clearly mentioned, because they are actually going to tell what are you going to do in your particular research design. Now, the materials and methods, right? It should reflect while reading that you are achieving all those objectives. They should tally, and it should clearly indicate that yes, while reading one experiment, one should clearly, if he or she goes back to your objectives sections, aim and objective section, they should clearly get to understand, okay, this objective has been achieved by this particular experiment. So you should be very clear in this aspect, so that there is no confusion in your aim and objective section and the materials and methods section. It should not look different. To improve clarity of presentation, this section may be further divided into subsections. Okay. Now, what does this mean is that we always take this section as one, materials and methods. Obviously, requirements and procedure are two separate things. So you can make subheadings. You can make a section for requirements. Again, you can divide it into chemicals, media, glassware, instruments, everything. And then while writing the methods or procedures also, you should make subsection. I mean, you should have a separate section for each and every experiment. The methods must be written in the past tense and the passive voice. This you should always take care of. You students generally make mistake with this. They do not follow this, and then again, it might happen that you have to rewrite your complete dissertation. So I hope this section is clear to all of you. Any questions from your side? Okay, Manami, can you unmute?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Manami, are you clear with materials and methods?
Yes, ma'am. Everything is clear for now.
Okay, no questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Okay, fine. Devashish says he needs a clarification on the subsections. He had a network issue. Okay, I'll repeat it for you, Devashish. Okay, now you see materials and methods, as I have told you, is equivalent to the like we do in our lab experiments, requirements and procedure. Right. Now, since we are taking this as one chapter in your dissertation or your report, it is necessary that you should divide this section into multiple subsections. Like you can keep the first section to be materials, where you can tell about all the requirements, right? And again, the requirements also can be subdivided into chemicals, media, glasswares, plasticwares, or instruments that you have used. Now, next, when you come to the methods part, that is the procedure part, again, what you can do is you must have conducted a lot of experiments during your dissertation or research work. So it is always better to divide your different experiments, because they will be obviously designed to achieve different objectives. So they should be again separated objective wise, right? So that there is no confusion between the aim and objective section and the material and method section. So Devashish, is it clear to you now? Okay, I guess Devashish is still having some network issue. Devashish, okay, fine. Let's move ahead. Then comes the results section. Now, again, for results also, I'll give you a tip. Always write your results in according to your methodology section, right? Usko, you should not try to move things up and down. It should be in the same way, the way in which you have conducted your experiments and you have mentioned them in your materials and methods section. Because see, you must have planned your research methods accordingly, that what experiment you are going to do first, what next, and then what next. So in the same way, it happens to be like, the say for example, the results of experiment number 2 might be dependent on the results of experiment number 1. So the thing is, they should be properly mentioned, and again, you should write them in accordance to your materials and methods. So this section states what you found actually. And the following should be included in your results: pictures and spectra. Obviously, once we report our findings, then we also have to give proofs or evidence that you have actually done your research. So what you can do is you can take a picture of the instruments while working on it, right? You can take pictures of, say, if you're working on bacterial cultures, you see a change in color of media or anything, you can always record those pictures, because once you label your petri dishes or your test tubes, you always mention the date, and also they are also recorded in that picture. And obviously, if you have chosen for a sophisticated technique like HPLC or NMR, then you get a spectra. You should, you can say, always mention or paste those spectras in your result section. Then comes tables and graphs wherever practical. I mean, it is always advisable because you see, you get a lot of data. Suppose you get some spectrophotometric reading or any digital reading, right? It never gives, it becomes very difficult for a reader to get a trend out of those aspects, right? Suppose you're working on enzyme activity, you are working on a factor that how temperature affects enzyme activity, and you are doing it spectrophotometrically. You get some data. It is always better to represent that data in graphs and in tables so that it is understandable to the reader. Because once you'll make tables, then also you're going to make headings in different columns. So that will help one to understand what were the different concentrations of DNA you have taken, what are the different set of temperatures that you used while studying that particular experiment. And then again, when you trends in the form of spectrophotometric readings, you can always represent them in the form of graphs, and one, while just looking at the graph, one will easily know what is the effect of temperature on that particular material. Then brief statements of the results in the text without repeating the data in the graphs and tables. Now, once we report our results, we make tables and graphs, but then we just have to write in text the important findings also. Okay, so you can just say whatever data you have got, it is just you can say a statement that justifies or explains your results. But one thing you should keep in mind that it is not always good to repeat what you have written in your tables and graphs. So you should design it very beautifully so that it is precise and always informative. When writing about each picture, graph, or table, refer to it parenthetically. Like, say, for example, you want to, like we were talking about the effect of temperature on DNA stability on DNA or DNA denaturation. You're reading that. So, suppose you have represented the trend with the help of a graph, and that is the first figure in your work. So, you'll mention that the results of the effect of temperature on the denaturation of DNA are represented in the figure 1, right? Or can be easily or can be learned from the following figure. Then in the bracket, you can write down figure 1. So whatever figures and tables you refer, it is always, you can say, necessary to mention those figures and tables in brackets. If possible, give a section of related results and then comment on them rather than presenting many pages of unrelated results and then discussing them at the end. Subheadings can be used to divide this section so that it is easier to understand. Obviously, you'll make subheadings because I've told you that you should always write your results in coordination to whatever methodology or experiments you have done, right? And as it is mentioned here, that you should always clearly mention your results of that particular section there itself, and you should not try to just you can say summarize or gather all the results in the last. So make very you can say precise sections according to the methodology and try to mention the major results there itself. The results section is dedicated to presenting the actual results, not to discussing the meaning of interpretation. We always discuss our results in the discussion section only. The results should be summarized using appropriate tables and figures. Every figure and table should have a legend that describes concisely what is contained or shown. Then, of course, you must always give a legend to your figures and tables. And it is a trend that we always give legends for figures below the figure, and the table legends are always mentioned above the table. Throughout the report, but especially in this section, pay attention to reporting numbers with an appropriate number of significant figures. Since you are giving a specific data in tables, you should be very clear with, and you should be very, you should be very careful while mentioning those results, because suppose you miss a decimal, again, it is going to change the meaning of that a complete result, right? So you should be very careful here while mentioning the results. I'm telling you this because nowadays we always type our results over computers in MS Word or whatever software you are using. So sometimes it is a typing error, and but that typing error can lead to a lot of misconception. So just once you write down your results, the best way is to just revise or go through them once or twice so that you are sure that whatever data you have mentioned there is correct. So any questions on the result section?
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, what if results and discussions were only the same topic? Then we will not discuss the result means interpretation or there itself in the result. Like you said in the previous point in the result section, you are not supposed to discuss or interpret its meaning. What if result and discussion were the same topic, and then we will not then also
Okay,
we will
okay,
not discuss.
Madhura. I got your question that please mute yourself. That you just want to say that if result and discussion is one chapter, right? Then again, we discuss the results there itself, right? We are not going to write the discussion separately. So as and when we mention the results, just after mentioning the results, we discuss each and everything there itself, right? So it is a case when the results and discussion section is one. Okay, Madhura, please unmute.
Yes, ma'am. For
Are you clear with this?
experiment, only after the result we will write the discussion for every
Yes, yes,
individual
yes, yes.
experiment we perform. Okay, ma'am.
Yes, of course. You have
Okay,
to
ma'am.
discuss it there itself. Okay, thank you
Thank you,
so
ma'am.
much. So now, if we have a separate discussion section, or even if you are writing it along with the results, then here I'll tell you what actually the discussion should tell about. The discussion interprets the results in the light of the project's objectives. The most important goal of the discussion section is to interpret the results so that the reader is informed of the insight or answers that the results provide, right? The discussion should see, one result can have multiple aspects where it can be discussed, but while discussing your result you should keep in mind what was the major objective that was achieved through this experiment that was included in your research. So you should always discuss those results in that particular aspect. You should not lose track of that. The discussion should also present an evaluation of the particular approach taken by the group. For example, based on the results, how could the experimental procedure be improved? What additional future work may be warranted? And what recommendations can be drawn? So if you're doing it separately, discussion you are writing separately, then you can mention it in the concluding paragraph or side by side with the results. But if we have a separate chapter for discussion, then of course in the end we always keep a concluding paragraph for discussion where we try to incorporate all these things. Now state the interpretation of your findings, perhaps comparing or contrasting them with the literature. Reflect on your actual data and observations. You should give very general statements in discussion, right? You should always prepare your discussion according to what results you have got, and then you can always mention whether they support whatever findings you have mentioned in your literature review or they contradict that. Then again, mentioning, suppose there is a contradiction, then again you have to discuss the reasons that how could have these contradictions arise. Explain or rationalize errant data or describe possible sources of error and how they may have affected the outcome. This is what I was trying to say, that in case you find any discrepancy or any disagreement with what has been reported by major researchers in that field, then you have to discuss that particular part also. I mean, you have to just discuss the reason, the possible reasons that could have led to such results from your side. The discussion must answer the question, what do the results mean? It is an argument which is based on the results. So this statement best describes the discussion. So while writing your discussion, you should always keep this thing in mind. So any questions on discussion?
Ma'am,
Okay, Ritika. Okay, Manami, do you have a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, if we are getting any surprising result, like we have not expected that to happen, then we are going to discuss about it in the discussion or directly in the conclusion. We are supposed to write
No,
about
no,
that.
you should not, you can say, add those surprises or some unexpected results in the conclusion section, right? You have to, first of all, mention that finding in that particular experiment, and then you have to discuss the reasons. As I have told you, it is again, it will come under an unexpected result. And before mentioning it in the conclusion, it should be incorporated in the results and the discussion section. I hope, Manami, it is clear to you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Then comes the conclusion. This is the summing up of your argument or experiment or research and should relate back to the introduction, right? You have presented an introduction stating what you're going to do, how you're going to do that, and what would be the possible things that your research is going to tell about. So, in conclusion, it should just relate back all those things that you have mentioned in the introduction. The conclusion should only consist of few sentences and should reiterate the findings of your experiment or research. The conclusion should summarize the central points made in the discussion section, reinforcing for the reader the value and implications of the work. So it should be just a gist, a few sentences, two, three, or four sentences that one should understand that what could you conclude from that particular research. Say, for example, if you were conducting a research on effect of temperature on DNA denaturation, then you just have to conclude what did you observe according to the experiments that you have done. So it should not contain, of course, any literature citations or anything. It should be made in your own language and it should contain your own thoughts. If the results were not definitive, specific future work that may be needed can be briefly described. Again, if you feel like that whatever you had planned for your research was not sufficient enough to determine all the aspects that you have mentioned in the introduction section, then in the conclusion, again, you just have to mention the future prospects for that. The conclusion should never contain any surprises. Therefore, any conclusions should be based on observations and data that are already discussed. So this is answer to Manami's question also, that in conclusion, we always make a statement according to what we got in our result section, what we have mentioned in our result section, and how we have discussed those results. Now, the last part is the references, and I consider it to be the most important part because, again, I have told you, references reflects what literature survey you have done and what recent researches you have read about, or if you one wants to know how have you got to know about the background of your research, I can just take a look at what references you have considered. Again, in the references section, you mention what journals you have gone through, and then again, we know what type of journals are good in that particular research area. So this references section is very, very important. So the references section should contain complete citations following standard form. Now again, references or citations can be made in different styles that we will discuss in the next class. So again, while writing the references, you have to consider what format that particular organization considers, and then in that particular format only, you should mention the references. The form of the citation depends on the type of source being referenced and is different for whole books, chapters in books, and articles which are published in a journal. Of course, we have different formats for all these types of references, so you have to follow that particular format. Cite any references that you have used, ensuring that each item in the reference list has in-text citation. the references that you have mentioned in this particular chapter or this segment of your dissertation should always match with all the references that you have mentioned in text. And every in-text citation has a full reference in the reference list at the end of your paper. So the point is you just have to match your in-text references with those that have been mentioned in the list in the last segment of your report. Ensure that references are formatted according to the style required by the journal. If you are submitting a paper or your lecturer or supervisor or university in which you are going to submit your writing, and be careful with spellings. It occurs with the names of the authors. Sometimes they belong to a different country where it is very difficult to pronounce or spell those references. So you must always check that they should be clearly mentioned. Otherwise, they will not match and it will go as a false reference. So this is all about your scientific writing or project report preparation. So in case you have any questions, you can unmute and ask questions. Otherwise, I'll end the session. Okay, I'm waiting for your responses. If you have a question, please type your question in chat or unmute yourself. If you do not have any question, please type OK in the public chat option. Thank you so much, and I'll just end the session now and continue with the different styles of citation in the next section. Thank you so much.